Namaste, viewers. Welcome to Jaipur Dialogue USA and Jaipur Dialogue. And today we are going to talk about a very important topic, which I have always considered to be very relevant in the modern context. If you have seen my Twitter handle, I always say that with great pride that Sanatan Dharma is the need of the hour and the whole world needs to follow it. And obviously, there are serious issues relating to that. One of the important questions that comes about in my mind is how modern is Indic wisdom? How modern is Sanatan Dharma? Because modernity is a word because everybody wants to be modern, the in thing. One of the things that we do in our work, we always say that the world belongs to those who are not the fittest, not the survival of the fittest, but those who adjust and adopt a changing environment. So, we are going to talk about Indic modernity today, how relevant it is. Before that, I want to request you to subscribe, like, and press the bell icon and support our channel. And today, I welcome Mr. Vineet Vijay Raghavan. He is a remarkably young man, as you can see him, and he runs a website called Indic Explorer, and he does a program. So far, he has done about 63 of them episodes on his Indic Explorer website. Remarkable again, because this man himself was invisible at one time. He didn't want to be known as Indic Explorer. He didn't want to be known as Vineet Vijay Raghavan, the Indic Explorer, but the Indic Explorer. So today he is visible to you. As you can make out, he is Vijay Raghavan. So he's definitely somewhere part of the southern India. So that part is very welcome. So Vineet ji, you are a remarkable young man and you are doing a lot of work on Indic Explorer. So share with our audience, how did you get into uh, the Indic Explorer concept? What motivated you, especially in the YouTube and other channels? The young men always want to be current with the time, and political issues remain the hub of the conversation. So you have chosen a rather tough area to talk about Indic Explorer. So go ahead, make your day, and tell us what Indic Explorer does and how has been your experience so far.
Firstly, hi guys, I'm Vineet. Thank you so much, Vibhuti Ji, for giving me this opportunity to speak with Jaipur Dialogues. Uh, you're right, it's a very unique concept. And when I was starting out, people were like circumspect in the sense as to what it would be like and all of that. But I, in my mind, had a very positive view about this, and I wanted to talk about this idea in detail. So, mine is actually not a website, it's a YouTube channel. I also have a Twitter handle and an Instagram account. And I actually started out as a speaker on Clubhouse, and I think that's where we as well connected.
Yes.
And over there, I found a lot of resonance for a lot of the ideas that I was talking about. And then from there on, that's where I decided that probably going, out and doing a YouTube channel and talking about these ideas, talking with different guests, uh, would give an opportunity, a platform to flesh this idea out. So I would think of my YouTube channel, which is cultural, it is civilizational, it focuses on socio-cultural issues, Indic socio-cultural issues, but it looks at it from a modern lens. And when I use the word modern, a lot of people, especially on the civilizational side, will be circumspect because there is some level of skepticism and fear as well because it is associated with the West. That is my hypothesis, that I want to demystify modernity, separate it from Western modernity, and then present an alternative view of Indic modernity, which will, if you hear through the ideas with an open mind, you will understand how different it is from what we all think about it. And it is an idea whose time has come, and it's an idea in a true Hindu dharmic way. It's not exclusive, it can coexist with all other cultural and civilizational norms that already exist. So that is basically the crux of what I wanted to do.
That's truly remarkable, and I always say that India's youth is the future. That's where the future lies. The demographic dividend, the cultural war. At Jaipur Dialogue, we are trying to change the minds of people and to accept the Indic narrative. We are doing that. So share with us, how does the Sanatan principle, as is known as, which is our philosophy, which is eternal. We talk about the eternal truth. So, how modern does eternal truth have to be accepted by our own people first before we let other people accept the modernity of Indic thoughts? So, how do you relate modernity? How do you define modernity? And why is it relevant in this context of 21st century? Because of the tectonic shift brought by technology, which is bringing knowledge to the fore, is no longer confined to a closed space of only those who read it, because anybody can access any information anytime. So, share with us your concept of modernity in the Western concept that you are referring to, and how does the Indian modernity become relevant, and why it is important for us Indians mostly to know about it.
So it's a very important thing you mentioned. So before I go into modernity, I wanted to talk about Sanatan because Sanatan is eternal, right?
Right? I
So
said that. I
modern is
said
very
that just now.
specific.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So modern is specific to a certain period. It's contemporary to that period, right? So how do you reconcile that? Because there are two aspects of Sanatan, which is Shruti and Smriti. The Shruti, which is eternal for all times, and the Smriti, which changes with time. So there is an inherent sense of being relevant to the contemporary world, even in our ancient texts. With that in mind, let me talk about what is the definition generally of modernity. Modernity is a historical and cultural epoch which is characterized by a significant departure from established traditions, values, norms, and practices. Please note that the word significant departure, it is departure. It is not a necessarily, it may be but a break from the past, but it is not necessary that it has to be a break from the past. It is just departure in the sense कि आप move कर रहे हैं. And this relates to technological, sociological, political, economic, etc aspects. Now here is where I bring Western modernity, which is very distinct in comparison to all other modernity. And modernity is not just Western monopoly. There are other cultures which also have modernity. They've experienced it, they've defined it, and I'll come to that as well, including Asian cultures. Western modernity is distinct in that it is evident in Western societies that there is a decisive rupture from established norms, values, and practices. Please note the word rupture. Matlab, there is a point where you break from the past and you create something new. It may or may not have features of the past. It does not have any obligation or holy cows, so to speak, from the past. तो आप आगे बढ़ रहे हैं और अगर आपको लग रहा है कि पीछे का anything that is from the past is not right for you, you can completely destroy that edifice and create something new. This is Western modernity, and this is where the problem comes. It is not in the progress that there is an issue, it is in the destruction of everything that is the old. Having said that, largely, if you look at historians, Western modernity was defined in three phases. The first phase was early modernity, which was around 1500 to 1789. It ended somewhere between the American and the French Revolution. और इसका characterization, the key features of this was the Renaissance, the Protestant Reformation, the Scientific Revolution, and the Age of Enlightenment. इसका सबसे key feature ये है is the invention of the printing press. क्योंकि प्रिंटिंग प्रेस के इन्वेंशन से क्या हुआ, लिटरेसी बिकेम मास. यू डिड नॉट रिलाई ऑन सर्टेन पीपल ओनली टू इंटरप्रेट द टेक्स्ट. एवरीबडी कुड फ्रीली एक्सेस द इंटेलिजेंस अवेलेबल एंड इट वाज रिटन इन लोकल लैंग्वेजेस रादर देन ग्रीक एंड लैटिन. सो ये था अर्ली मॉडर्निटी. देन देयर इज द क्लासिकल मॉडर्निटी जो स्टार्ट होता है 1789 से, जस्ट अराउंड द फ्रेंच रेवोल्यूशन, goes right up to 1900, and depending on whom it could go up to World War I as well. ये सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट फेज है, ट्रांसफॉर्मेशनल फेज है, a huge break from the past, because यहाँ पे इंडस्ट्रियल रेवोल्यूशन happens, Newspapers become vogue, telegraphs, telephones, railway connectivity, all of that starts. So people start moving around, exchange of ideas start happening. And that's where you start seeing the significant rupture. और फाइनल स्टेज है लेट मॉडर्निटी, जो 1900 से लेके 1989. एंड व्हाई 1989? फॉल ऑफ द सोवियत यूनियन and the Berlin Wall. वो basically the era when communism falls. That's when the final stage of modernity ends, which is basically your global lifestyle, modern lifestyle जो आज हम देख रहे हैं, जिसको in a way आप बोल सकते हो पोस्ट मॉडर्न है, इसके रूट्स इस पीरियड से आते हैं. So this is what modernity is. And you spoke about talking about Western modernity. If you were to look at the key pillars of Western modernity, what was that? रैशनैलिटी एंड रीजन, कि हर चीज को, एक हाइपोथेसिस को आप रीजन या रैशनल और लॉजिक के थ्रू टेस्ट करोगे, प्रूव करोगे, एंड देन यू अग्री. एंड इफ समथिंग डजंट फिट, इफ यू गेट सम न्यू प्रूफ्स, योर रैशनैलिटी एनफोर्सेस ऑन यू टू लुक एट इट इन अ डिफरेंट वे एंड टू बेसिकली पुरानी चीज चली गई, यू क्रिएट समथिंग न्यू. There is no scope for innovation or intuition in this. That is one criticism. It is very very rigid, so it gives you an outward appearance ki bahut flexible hai, but it does not allow you any flexibility in terms of use of intuition. And I'll come to that. Hold that thought. Uske baad hai very hyper individualism. Like it starts ki society ke jo pehle jo bade families hua karte the, and slowly the family structure starts becoming smaller and smaller. Instead of 4 or 5 children, the age of contraception comes and you have 1 2 children, and then eventually you have no children, and then the marriage itself breaks and things like this. So everything becomes centering around the individual, because you're talking about individual rights with no accountability, with no social contract. Secularism, this has been done to death, कि you're separating church and state. तो बहुत ही, because there were so many wars of religion, and this kind of thing is not in the way it was seen in the West, it wasn't in India. So every sect, Catholicism, Protestantism, even Orthodoxy, they all have fights with each other. And then they decide that there is a requirement to separate statecraft from religion. Scientific inquiry, again, technological advancement, jo hum, these kind of things which are again linked to rationality and reason. Market economy and capitalism, jiska evolution starts with mercantilism and colonialism, and then it goes to capitalism. This is important. Liberal democracy, which is something that Western countries feel is the ideal in every society that can be applied uniformly, because it is modern and it is enlightened. अर्बनाइजेशन एंड इंडस्ट्रियलाइजेशन, ये बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है, और ये शायद हर सोसाइटी के लिए उतना ही वैलिड है, कि एज द सोसाइटी इंडस्ट्रियलाइजेस, कंट्री साइड से लोग सिटी के तरफ मूव करते हैं, बिकॉज सिटीज पर्सोनिफाई प्रोग्रेस. So that is something that is very important to modernity. And as you industrialize, आप country like farming से अलग अलग professions में जाना शुरू करते हैं. Your tie to your land, your specific land, not the country, but your land, starts dwindling down when you live in an apartment complex. Emphasis on progress and challenges to tradition. This is very important for Western modernity. अब मैं इसके आगे, बिकॉज ये वेस्टर्न मॉडर्निटी का डेफिनेशन हो गया, बिफोर आई गो टू इंडियन और इंडिक मॉडर्निटी एंड द केस दैट आई वांट टू प्रेजेंट फॉर इट, पहले तो मैंने बता दिया कि हाउ वेस्टर्न मॉडर्निटी इज नॉट ऑल मॉडर्निटी. अब मेरे को ये बताना है कि अलग अलग नजरिए हैं मॉडर्निटी को देखने के लिए, सो दैट वी डोंट फील अबनॉर्मल और एंशियस कि ये वेस्टर्न है. सो दैट इज द रीजन व्हाई आई वांट टू टॉक अबाउट जापानीज मॉडर्निटी. अब इसमें मेरे एक दोस्त अजय ने लिखा है, he's in the Netherlands, and he's done a very good Twitter thread on this subject, so I'm kind of quoting him here. Shintoism, which is जापान का जो पेगन रिलीजन है, इसका एक बहुत अच्छा प्रिंसिपल ये है कि इट एनकरेजेस सैक्रिफाइसिंग कंफर्ट फॉर हार्ड वर्क, which is something very rooted in Japanese tradition even today, and it emphasizes on learning and group harmony. तो इसमें वो एक ग्रुप में रह के अपने इंडिविजुअलिज्म को एक्सप्लोर करने की बात कही जा रही है. It is because people behaviorally adhere to values. These values, Japan has seamlessly imbibed modern technology with age-old tradition. अब मैं इसका एक बहुत ही यूनिक एग्जांपल देना चाहूंगा विच इज बेसिकली शिंकानसेन कल्चर जो जापान में है, जिसमें ये कहा जाता है कि आप ट्रेडिशंस को प्रायोरिटाइज करेंगे ओवर एनीथिंग दैट मेक्स इट ऑब्सोलीट. तो इफ यू सी हियर, भले ही आप इसको एक तरह से मॉडर्निटी बोल रहे हैं, बट इट लुक्स एट हाउ यू कैन सेफगार्ड ट्रेडिशंस इन द कंटेम्पररी वर्ल्ड. सो दिस इज अ वेरी डिफरेंट वे ऑफ लुकिंग एट इट. एक एग्जाम्पल इसका ये है, जापान में एक टिफिन सिस्टम हुआ करता था कॉल्ड बेंटो बॉक्सेस, जहां पे बेसिकली होम कुक्ड मील्स छोटे छोटे बॉक्सेस में डाल के लोग ले जाते थे काम के लिए. और ये ट्रेडिशन एक्चुअली 12th-13th century से है. सो men would kind of carry cooked food, ड्राई राइस जो वहां पे बहुत खाया जाता है, इन देयर बेंटो बॉक्सेस. इसका मैं एक इमेज भी आपको मतलब दिखाऊंगा. सो ये जो आप देख सकते हैं ये बेंटो बॉक्सेस का, अगर मैं स्क्रीन शेयर करूं तो.
Don't worry about it because I know what bento box is all about. Because
श्योर
only two
श्योर
days
श्योर.
ago, in a Japanese restaurant, fusion restaurant, one of the favorite items I like is the bento box. It's a very delicious combination of varieties of food, salad, vegetables, or whatever you want. It is put in it. So bento box, I know, and I think people will appreciate that clarification. But you are bringing out some very important part, connecting modernity with ancient wisdom or ancient practices, collective practices. So the point which I am trying to come to now is, in all this modernity part of it, where does Indic modernity fit in here? Tell us more about that as we go forward. Modernity in Japan, to aap charcha kar rahe hain. I'm very happy also that without my request, you have also started speaking in Hindi, which is rather good. I'm very impressed with that. So this is very nice that you are bringing Hindi because a large number of our audience also is Hindi speaking. So you can definitely mix and match Hindi and English and carry on at your comfort level. So tell
राइट.
us more about that. How does, you gave the world, you gave the European, you gave the Japanese. Tell us about Indic modernity now. How
मैं इसमें
modern
एक
is Indic thought? Go ahead.
मैं एक छोटा सा खाली क्लैरिफिकेशन वो बेंटो बॉक्स का ये देना चाहता था कि इट वाज एक्चुअली मेड, दीस देयर वर कप्स इन दीस बेंटो बॉक्सेस जो हाथ से पहले बनाए जाते थे. बट टुडे जापान, द बेंटो बॉक्स दैट यू प्रोबेबली एट ऑन इज मेड बाय रोबोट्स. सो दे यूज्ड टेक्नोलॉजी टू
Right.
प्रिजर्व देयर ट्रेडिशन. ये
Right.
मेरा मतलब बोलने का एक
Yes.
सारांश था.
Yes. Yes.
So coming to Indic modernity, and this is where there is, I'll kind of define it. It's a cultural and philosophical adaptation within India, which is marked by a clear, इसका एक line है, incremental change rather than radical break from the past. चेंज विथ कंटिन्यूटी, हम बदल रहे हैं लेकिन वो बदलाव ऐसे हो रहा है कि वो एक लिंक्ड तरीके से हो रहा है हमारे पास्ट से. सो वो जो ब्रेक था, जो रप्चर था वेस्टर्न मॉडर्निटी में, वो नहीं है. देयर इज अ डिपार्चर इन द सेंस, टू द लिमिटेड एक्सटेंट दैट हम आगे बढ़ रहे हैं, बट इट इज नॉट अ ब्रेक फ्रॉम द पास्ट. It involves the integration of traditional Indian thought and spiritual values with contemporary principles. So एक synthesis है, coming together है of the old and new. That is how I would define एक basic level में Indic modernity. अब इसके भी कुछ pillars हैं. सबसे पहला पिलर ये है कि इंडिविजुअलिटी विद इन अ कलेक्टिव फ्रेमवर्क. और ये शायद बिकॉज इंडिया में कल्चरली रूटेड लोग कभी कभी ये मानते हैं कि इंडिया इज अ कलेक्टिविस्ट सोसाइटी. पूरा सही नहीं है, पार्शियली सही है कि देयर इज कम्युनिटी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, लेकिन इंडिविजुअल फ्रीडम भी है, विच इज बैलेंसिंग द इंडिविजुअल एंड द कलेक्टिव. तो इसका मतलब ये है कि हम कम्युनिटी का पार्ट हैं लेकिन हम इंडिविजुअल भी हैं, और दोनों चीजों को इक्वल इंपॉर्टेंस दिया गया है. अगर आप फिलोसॉफिकल लेवल में देखेंगे, कर्मा इज अ वेरी इंडिविजुअलिस्टिक कॉन्सेप्ट. आप दूसरे के कर्म के लिए आप फल या उसका जो भी बुरा चीज है वो आप नहीं भुगतेंगे. योर एक्शंस विल इम्पैक्ट यू इवेंचुअली, राइट, इन योर लाइफ. at the end of your life. जो जब आप चित्रगुप्त के सामने पूरा कर्चा चिट्टा निकालेंगे, your karma is what counts. To some extent, your pitru, there is some level of that inherited aspect as well, but largely it is your own karma, not your neighbor's karma, not your community's karma that impacts you. So there is individuality and there is a community and there is a balancing of that in Indic modernity. दूसरा है स्पिरिचुअल इंक्लूसिविटी एंड डाइवर्सिटी. इसका मतलब है कि हमारे बहुत सारे संप्रदाय हैं, हमारी बहुत सारी मान्यताएं हैं, प्रथाएं, ट्रेडिशंस हैं, और वो सब हमारे लिए इंपॉर्टेंट है. सो इन दैट सेंस दैट वी look at diversity as a very natural thing. हमारे लिए वो, we don't go around telling people platitudes on diversity because we kind
Right.
of live it, day in and day out. The third aspect ये बहुत important है, sustainability and harmony with nature. जो आपने वेस्टर्न मॉडर्निटी में कहीं भी एनवायरमेंट का बात सुना नहीं, और इसका बहुत ही मेरा एक फिलोसॉफिकल एनालिसिस है. when you think that your life is only in this world और ये जब खत्म हो जाता है, you're gone, right? The next generation, whoever comes, they live on this planet. Why would you care? But if you are part of a continued chain, आप आगे वाले generations को भी कुछ धरोहर देना चाहते हैं, also you will take rebirth on this world. So it becomes a way to hold you accountable, and responsible to keep the environment, safe for the coming generations. And that's why environment, ये मेरा analysis है, ये accountability towards the environment हमारे tradition का बहुत ही important part है. और एक चीज है धर्मा, which is the sense of duty and righteousness. There is so much talk of rights, but there is no talk of duty, responsibility, and accountability. And upholding those ethical, moral principles. It's not religion. Dharma is that sense of duty and righteousness. Ethical or moral principles जो society को बनाए रखता है, जोड़ के रखता है. And of course, you pursue knowledge and wisdom, but there is, apart from scientific and rational thinking, which is also not new to us, we also have that. It also gives certain flexibility for intuition. Because sometimes where intuition stops and rationality begins, you can't separate the two. दोनों चीज का churning होके निकलना जरूरी है for innovation to happen. So that is something very unique to Indic modernity. और एक चीज है सेवा, एंड ये थोड़ा मुझे लगता है हमने शायद छोड़ दिया है, बट हमारे पूर्वजों ने इस चीज को बहुत अच्छे से फॉलो किया था, विच इज द सेंस ऑफ सेल्फलेस सर्विस फॉर द कम्युनिटी. ये चीज बोली जाती है, वी टॉक अबाउट लंगर्स. वी ऑल्सो हैव द ट्रेडिशन ऑफ भंडारा इन वैष्णो देवी. And temples used to, when they were free, serve food to the poor, to the people who live around them. Community kitchens were a very important part of temple ecosystems, and also doing any kind of charity or service to society. There is another point that I want to mention, because ये है decentralized theology but centralized social mobilization. और इसका मैं समझाना चाहूंगा इसको विस्तार से, क्योंकि there is always this fear that theologically we have as dharmic people, which is हमारे इतने सारे संप्रदाय हैं, इतना डाइवर्सिटी है, उसको कभी होमोजेनाइज नहीं करना चाहिए. That is true. But there is also modernity demands that because there are benefits to scale. And when you divide yourself into multiple parts, there is a tendency, and there is of course historical proof to this, that in the onset of any external pressures, our disunities become the great line of difficulty, and hence we end up losing as a civilization. And this is something that we need to guard. So we need to protect the philosophical and theological diversity, but at the same time we need to create social structures jisse there is a sense of centralization that in
I will stop you right here before my thought vanishes from my mind, because
Sure.
you brought in several very important elements, and I want you to focus specifically on the structures and how the centralized thing can hold the glue together. Because at this point in time, majority of Hindus will continue to talk about हमारे में यूनिटी नहीं है, हमारे में पर्पस नहीं है, हम हिंदू लोग ऐसे हैं, दूसरे लोग हमारा अब्यूज कर रहे हैं, एक्सप्लॉइट कर रहे हैं. My thought process to you here is, and I'm glad we are talking about this, and coming from a young man like you, I visualize there is a future. I hope there are many more like you, or many more people join you in your effort to do this Indic Explorer part of it. Talk about decentralization. You referred to when temples were free, and they are not now, and that temple economy is a structure by itself. So just a few days ago, when I was talking to Subhash Kakji, Professor Subhash Kakji, we were talking about, but India doesn't have, Hindus don't have a structure. And he said, and very rightly so, that we have had, the temple structure was our institutional framework. That's what the Western people demolished, and they became the owners of our temple. Even today, despite all the Hindu majority of BJP, they are not able to free the temples. Talk about that in terms of structure, unity, and purpose. How does one arrive at in today's world?
Okay. So, so the thing that I want to talk about here is that I think sampradayas are at the very core of Hinduism, and I think sampradayas are a great way to organize society, uh, because they are the last mile connectors. Having said that, that is at a decentralization level. At a centralization level, हमारा थियोलॉजिकल डाइवर्सिटी हो सकता है, लेकिन हमारा सोशियो कल्चरल यूनिटी भी उसके साथ रह सकता है, इन द सेंस दैट any socio-cultural or community activity that we do, whether it's a tree plantation drive, whether it is educational institutions, which also we don't have anymore, uh, you know, educational institution which is across all, some like, not exclusive to one community or anything like that, but for all dharmic people, any form of socio-cultural mobilization. और एक मैं एक example देना चाहूँगा. Let's say that a temple, a small, let's say a Ganesh Mandir in a corner of Maharashtra, in a small village, you know that there are so many small temples, Vibhuti ji, जहाँ पे एक ही priest होता है. There's hardly any money that that temple has. It can barely buy the agarbatti over there. But what if all temples were to come together to pool their resources? And I'll give you an example. Let's say a temple as big as Siddhivinayak takes it on itself to manage or to work in collaboration with all Ganesh mandirs. Now, there is a twofold advantage in this centralization. And just hold that thought. So, there is no saying that, oh, her temple ka apna prata hai, they would be decentralized. But the centralization I'm talking about is the more footfalls come in smaller Ganesh mandirs, the more Ganesh devotees there will be. The more Ganesh devotees there are in your local community, in your street or in your chowk, the more people will go every once in 6 months or once a year to the larger Ganesh Mandir, which is your Siddhivinayak Mandir. So there is an incentive for a larger temple to manage smaller temples, especially of the same deity, and for the smaller temple to benefit from the large pool of resources that are there for the larger temple. So इसमें आपको एक clear benefit दिख रहा है centralization का. Now how that centralize, like of course that should be outside government control, but that has to happen at some level, at a socio cultural level. अब मान लीजिए एक community कोई charitable work कर रहा है या एक orphanage चला रहा है, should it not impact all other places? Like if there are orphans, should it be only in that place, or should it be for all, dharmic people? That's what I'm trying to say. So if, let's say, I'll give you another example. हम लोग देख रहे हैं कि जॉइंट फैमिली सिस्टम क्रम्बल हो रहा है. इट इज नॉट एज जॉइंट, स्पेशली इन अर्बन एरियाज एनी मोर, एट द सेम लेवल एज इट यूज्ड टू बी. अब इसका एक नेगेटिव है. नेगेटिव ये है कि आर culture is transmitted from one generation to another, and to a large extent, if you notice, it's the grandparents, it's not the parents, it's the grandparents who, when they spend the time with the child, are able to imbibe those values in the grandchild. because
Hmm.
parents, especially in families where both, mother and father are working, don't get the same amount of time, right? And even in the olden days, the woman also used to go and work in the farm. So the grandparents used to fill that role, but now you have a situation where that grandparents are not living together, and kids are becoming culturally deracinated. As a youngster, that is something that worries me. So think about it. If all temples come together and they run a dharmically, funded nanny service, where nannies who are trained in dharmic values take care of children, it uses the nuclear family system, because no matter how much you oppose it, that is happening. So you need a solution for that, and to preserve your culture as well. And at the same time, they play the role of that missing grandparent. अब इसमें डिसेंट्रलाइजेशन की कोई बात ही नहीं है. ये तो तब वर्क करेगा जब सेंट्रलाइजेशन होगा. So my point of view is administration and also socio-cultural mobilization. In uh, this is one example. Corporate में होता है team building activity, because when people from different backgrounds come together, let's say a dharmic run school, that's when those interactions happen and they form teams, they work together. That is when you will be able to create that cohesive identity. And the fact that we don't have dharmic run schools because the law doesn't allow it in India, I think is a very important issue. It is ignored, it is not spoken so much as other issues are, because the schooling system, an indigenous schooling system is pivotal to creating that common sense, of Sanatan culture, of Dharmic culture. And we underestimate and underrate it, but it's very, very crucial. So, and there are multiple other ways through. I mean, so these are just a few ways. But let's say you do any socio-cultural activity or a charity work. Let's say a temple is doing a tree plantation drive. Why should that be decentralized? Why can't temples come together and work together? You know. So when you create an incentive mechanism where, yeah, they might be theologically different. कोई उसको harmonize मतलब homogenize करने के लिए नहीं बोल रहा है, but there are synergies where they can actually work together, you know so
एक बात
that is
बताइए,
exactly.
एक
हाँ.
बात बताइए यहाँ पे, बिकॉज ये चर्चा है, ये हमें बार बार करनी पड़ेगी, बिकॉज यहाँ पे इंक्रीमेंटल चेंज जो हम हिंदुओं की बात होती है, there are times when you need a transformative change. You need to break from the past. But our way of life is remarkably beautiful. I'm very fond of our Indic way of life. I value family and think, as you mentioned about grandparents being the installation agent of culture. I mean, I'm happy to share with the audience here that my Nana ji actually, उन्होंने autobiography of the yogi किताब मुझे पढ़ी थी उन्होंने. He read the whole book to me when I was growing up as a child. एंड लेटर ऑन जब मैं बड़ा हुआ तो मैंने वो किताब पढ़ी, अपने बेटे को दी, एंड ही रेड द बुक. द पॉइंट विच आई एम ट्राइंग टू से इज दैट दिस इज वेयर द ट्रेडिशन कैसे कायम रहता है, आगे बढ़ता है. तो मेरा ये पूछना था आपसे कि what is wrong in Indic modernity vis-a-vis Western modernity, and how, क्यों भारतीय लोग अपनी मॉडर्निटी और अपनी इंडिक फिलोसफी को छोड़कर वेस्टर्न मॉडर्निटी और वेस्टर्न लाइफस्टाइल को अडॉप्ट किए जा रहे हैं. इसमें हम कहाँ फेल हो गए कि हम अपनी ही चर्चा भूल गए, अपने ही बारे में हमने कुछ पढ़ा नहीं, अपने ही बारे में कुछ जाना नहीं, और दूसरे को अडॉप्ट कर लिया. और उसके कारण जो है, हम फिर कॉन्फ्लिक्ट में आ जाते हैं, फ्लैश आता है कि हम तो ऐसे नहीं थे, हमारे में ऐसा नहीं होता है. तो इस पे कुछ आपकी चर्चा क्या है कि हाउ डज द वेस्टर्न एंड इंडिक मॉडर्निटी क्लैश और कन्वर्ज, एंड डज इंडिक मॉडर्निटी नीड अ ट्रांसफॉर्मेशनल शिफ्ट?
Firstly, I think Western modernity इतना हावी इसलिए है because Western, firstly because of colonialism, and thereafter the Western economies have been developed, and that's very important. जब तक आर्थिक व्यवस्था सही नहीं होती, तब तक वो होता ही रहेगा. Because as you know, and you'll see this, जो countries economically strong है, militarily भी strong है, but also economically, their culture in some way has a way to grow in other places, and you will see this with Korean culture as well, with K dramas, K movies, wo soft power aa hi jata hai. And when you see them as success stories, if your country or your civilization, for whatever reasons, historical, there were injustices, all of that, no argument against that. uh, if it doesn't show outwardly those prosperity measures that it had in the past, then for many people it looks like, oh, is philosophy ke wajah se, and that's wrong. Because political economic changes are not dependent on philosophy, though they may have some impact here and there, but our larger social life is very different. But because you associate that, you kind of idealize and idolize Western culture and hence Western modernity. That in itself doesn't prove that it is better or worse. In fact, it is even more incumbent on us that we challenge this thought and we present our worldview of modernity with incremental change. And when you say break from the past, Vibhuti ji, it depends. There is no single answer. Largely, the concept is that there is no break from the past. But if there are some issues that need to be corrected on a selective basis, there can be transformational movement. But the basic foundational values jo Sanatan hai, that does not change. So you're not breaking the core principles, right? And that is what Shruti Smriti tradition is. So you have a foundation, but वो building blocks ऊपर जो लग रहे हैं उसके ऊपर वो बदल सकते हैं. So yes, by and large, it's continuity. It is very selective and in terms of the transformational part. But yes, it is also ये बहुत important चीज है, because I see a lot of people are focused only on the past as a golden age. Was there a golden age, the Gupta period, the Mauryan period? Of course, there's no denying that. But our idea of studying history is to learn first, of course, be proud of the good things that have happened, but to learn, more importantly, learn from the mistakes of the past and present an alternative future where we learn from it and move forward. And ये एक एग्जाम्पल मैं देना चाहूंगा, बिकॉज संजय जी बहुत बार बोलते हैं अबाउट आवर कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ साइक्लिकल टाइम. साइक्लिकल टाइम में एक चीज होता है कि ऑफ कोर्स टाइम कीप्स, वो युग मूव होते रहते हैं एंड वी कमिंग बैक, बट उसमें और एक चीज भी है. साइक्लिकल टाइम इज नॉट कंप्लीटली डिवोर्स्ड फ्रॉम लीनियर टाइम. थिंक ऑफ इट कि एक सर्कल में देयर आर इनफाइनाइट नंबर ऑफ स्ट्रेट लाइंस.
Right.
So there is space for linear time as well. So the way I would define cyclical time is, history doesn't repeat itself, it rhymes. मतलब आप समझ रहे हैं, वही चीज आज नहीं आएगा, बट उसी तरीके का चीज आज भी आएगा. सो इट्स वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट कि हम गोल्डन एज को रखें हमारे, जब when we had issues and challenges as well for coming from the outside, उससे भी सीखें and we ensure that it never again happens. And we need our golden age. This is the most important thing in Indic modernity, in the here and now,
Right.
and a futuristic vision. That's very important. So yeah.
Yes, that's very very important because जैसे आपने चर्चा की अभी, तो मैं हमेशा कहता हूँ इसको कि ये सेंचुरी सनातन का है. The question is whether messengers of Sanatan, like you and I and Sanjay ji and Jaipur Dialogue and many others who are trying to do this, whether we are able to carry that message forward or not, because that's very critical for us, हमारे लिए, खास करके भारतीयों के लिए. इंडिक जो हैं, एक्सप्लोरर जो हैं, इंडिया के एक्सप्लोरर जो हैं, उनके लिए बहुत ज़रूरी है कि इस मॉडर्निटी को हम आगे बढ़ाएं. क्योंकि एक उदाहरण है इसके बारे में. और ये जो एक ज़माना था जबकि हमको गोल्डन चिड़िया कही जाती थी, हम सोने की चिड़िया माने जाते थे. एक समय था जबकि हम 40% से ज्यादा ग्लोबल ट्रेड के हम हिस्सेदार थे. उसके बाद 26% हुआ, फिर घट के ब्रिटिश जमाने में कितना कम हुआ, और आज हम फिर 4 ट्रिलियन इकोनॉमी हो गए हैं. My question here is, how do we revive? And all of that was without linguistic divisions, without English language, and in the world that we lived in, people came to us to study, right? हमने ये होने क्यों दिया? How did it happen? how do we prevent this from happening, and how do we capture back the glory that in the Indic life was once upon a time. So in this context, in the remaining time that we have in a few minutes, because we'll need to continue this dialogue forward, how to and when we have to do that. So we will come to that, but I want you to leave this conversation today, which what are the हमें करना क्या है, इन सब चीजों के जानने के बाद हमारा इतिहास इतना अच्छा है, हमें आज क्या करना चाहिए आपके हिसाब से, आप अपने युवा दल को, मैं आपको युवा दल कहूंगा, so that I when I close my eyes I am happy that the world is in good hands of young Indians. आप एक्शनेबल कैसे करेंगे अपने नौजवानों के साथ इस बात को, इंडिक मॉडर्निटी को, बोलिए. Did you hear me?
No, I
Yeah.
lost you the last couple of lines.
Oh, what I was saying is कि यूथ जो है, आपके हाथ में भारत का भविष्य है, करेक्ट? तो जिस तरह की चर्चा आपने की है कि हमारा जो इतिहास है, तो हम इतने बड़े सोने की चिड़िया थी चंद्रगुप्त मौर्य एंड ऑल दैट टाइम फॉरवर्ड, हम ये भूल गए. तो उस चीज को हम कैसे आगे कायम करें? व्हाट आर द एक्शनेबल चैलेंजेस that Indian youth faces, Indian population faces, Indic population faces, that we need to address? That will be my last question for the day, and that we will continue for the next conversation as well. But do tell us, what are the challenges and what are the actionable points that can happen today, now, here?
सो लाइक आई सेड, एक तो है कि अपने लोकल कम्युनिटीज से ज़्यादा एंगेज करें. एंड आई विल गिव यू एन एग्जांपल. Again, this is also my own, I would say, in a way, failure, which I need to correct and which I hope to correct, which I think all of us need to look at. हम जब अपने लोकल टेम्पल जाते हैं, जो छोटा टेम्पल है, वी आर ऑलवेज टॉकिंग अबाउट दोज बिग टेम्पल्स, राइट, इन दोज बिग पिलग्रिम टाउन्स. But the lifeblood of Sanatan Dharma is those smaller temples, which we forget. How often to the temples that we go on a weekly, daily, monthly basis, जो हमारा रेगुलर मंदिर है, वहाँ पे जो बाकी लोग आते हैं, कितनों को हम जानते हैं? I can personally tell you I am a culprit. 20 years से I go to a temple in my area. I haven't spoken or met a single person over there. How will a community form? बिकॉज वेन वी हम जब मंदिर जाते हैं, वी ओनली लुक एट इट एज एन इंडिविजुअल एक्सपीरियंस. मैं जाऊंगा, मैं कुछ चढ़ाऊंगा, प्रेयर करूंगा, कुछ श्लोक बोलूंगा, कुछ देर मौन रखूंगा, प्रसाद लेके टीका डाल के निकल जाऊंगा. वेयर इज द कम्युनिटी इन दिस? ये बहुत ही छोटा चीज है. यू डोंट हैव टू बी अ वेरी बिग एक्टिविस्ट फॉर दिस. व्हाट डज दैट टेम्पल रिक्वायर? Maybe it requires someone to help clean. Can you go and volunteer and do something in that temple? Can you, probably, if the priest needs something, can you form a group together to help them out? आप अपने लोकल लेवल में बहुत छोटे छोटे काम अगर कर सकते हैं, तो वो भी एक बहुत बड़ा चीज है. एंड आई थिंक मोर यूथ चैप्टर्स नीड टू बी फॉर्म्ड इन टेम्पल्स. और इसमें भी थोड़ा स्केल का जरूरत है, so that youngsters come to the temple. There has to be, I know I'm saying it may sound a little crude, but there has to be a way in which temples, which they used to in the past, community, जिसे हम कहते हैं समाज, समाज की स्थापना में मदद करें. और इसके लिए हमें ऐसे एक्टिविटीज करने पड़ेंगे जिसमें लोग, भिन्न भिन्न प्रकार के लोग एक साथ आए under the banner of the temple, at the temple, or in outreach programs around the temple. When you're doing, let's say, when the temple is making a meal in a community kitchen, can you go and serve the people, help the temple and help serve the food? Can you help make food with the people who are making it? वो
Right.
ग्रुप वाला फीलिंग जब आएगा ना, that
Mm.
is when you will start kind of internalizing this. So the
Right.
formation of communities via the temple ecosystem, ये सबसे ज्यादा जरूरी है. So yeah.
यस विनय, आपने समय खत्म हो रहा है. ये चर्चा मुझे बहुत आनंद आया. मुझे बहुत आशा और विश्वास है कि आप जैसे नौजवानों के हाथ में भारत का भविष्य सुरक्षित है. क्योंकि अगर आप इस तरह से कार्यरत रहेंगे तो देश को बहुत ही, देश और धर्म दोनों का ही बहुत ढाढ़स बढ़ेगा. एंड आई विल जस्ट मेक अ समेशन दैट आपने ये जो चर्चा की है, समाज, समुदाय और संप्रदाय, इन तीनों की व्यवस्था यूथ को करनी पड़ेगी. समाज, समुदाय और संप्रदाय, ये हमें कम्युनिटी लाइफ बनानी पड़ेगी. और आपको जान के प्रसन्नता होगी कि मैं इस बात की चर्चा हमेशा करता हूँ कि हमें अपना इंडिविजुअल कमिटमेंट दिखाना है, कम्युनिटी बनाना है, और उसको एक इंस्टीट्यूशनल फ्रेमवर्क में उसको आगे बढ़ाना है. सो थैंक यू वेरी मच फॉर ज्वाइनिंग टुडे. Very live conversation. I really enjoyed it. I hope the viewers will enjoy it and have enjoyed it too, because this particular conversation needs to be had more than once, repeatedly, because repetition has a value, because that's where the narrative gets established. So Vinayji, thank you very much for coming, and I'm very proud of you that from once upon a time an Indic explorer of Clubhouse who did not want to show his face because you did not know how the people will react, and that was another very important thing. Many of us do not, we hesitate to come out because we do not know how the society will react and how the people will treat us. So from that point of view, I'm delighted that you are out in the open. So folks, look at Vineet Vijay Raghavan, Indic Explorer, become one. So with these words, I will say thank you very much for joining today. Please like,
Thank you.
subscribe, and support our channel. Thank you, Vineet ji, for coming. As I always end my program with the invocation, Satyameva Jayate. And for truth to triumph, you and I have to stand for it and fight for it. Thank you very much for joining today. God bless. Satyamev
Thank you.
Jayate.
Thank you, Vibhuti ji.